Hey everybody, Bryce here from codelife.io, and today we're going to be going through the basics of creating a React component. So there's a couple of different pieces to this puzzle, right? So we have styling, we have prop type validation, and then the actual components themselves. So what we're going to focus on is just the component. I'm not going to get too much into the styling or too much into the prop type validation. So let's kind of glaze over those parts, but here's what we'll be building. It's just a simple kind of like to-do list, and you'll be able to click on them and basically indicate that they are not done or done by basically like checking the box, like a fancy way of checking the box. So that's what we're going to be building. It's not super crazy, but the important part is that we're going to build components. So essentially let me blow this up so you can see it a little better. We're going to build components that wrap around here. So this is one component here. And then we have another component that's the inner portion here. And so you'll see how we can use those components and reuse those components to build dynamic UIs. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Go here and kill my server. And I'm going to use Create React App. I have another video where I actually go and set up a brand new project with Create React App. So if you haven't seen it, please check that out. Hopefully I'll have a link in the description for you. So we're going to go npm, npm init React App, and we'll call it component tutorial. So that'll spin up a new project for us. In that command, you need to have Node installed in npm, which if you install Node, you should have npm. So npm init React App, and then the name of your project. Perfect. So now we're going to switch over and start using Yarn, because Yarn comes installed on Create React App project, which is just a quick way to bootstrap a React project. So let me clear this. We'll cd into our component tutorial. And from here, I just need to install one dependency. So we'll type yarn add Lodash, and you'll see why we need that here in a second. And that should install. Perfect. So now we can type yarn, I'll clear this. We can type yarn start. And it'll come back. Boop, boop, boop. It's probably still loading. Refresh the page here. There we go. So this is what you get out of the box. Nothing too crazy. So let's go ahead and start hacking on that. I'm just going to kill it here so I can launch my code editor. I'll spin that back up. Oops. Here we go. So let me open this wide open. Blow this up nice and big so you can see it. So I'm just going to come in here and start blowing away some files I don't need. So I'm just going to hit Command Delete on Mac. I'm sure it's Control Delete probably. On Windows, I don't need this test. I don't want it in the way. Sure, we'll leave the styling there. App.css, that's fine. Come in here. Let's remove this logo. And in here, we'll just gut this. Save that. Go to our project. There we go. So good to go. It just says hello world, nothing fancy. So I'm going to come in here in my app.css, and I'm going to just replace this real quick because we're not focusing on the styling. We're just getting into the components. So you'll see I just have some styling for unordered list. We just redid the app class and just set some properties to center it up on the page. And then we have an h1 tag, which we try to do some fancy, use a shadow, a text shadow essentially with white text in front of it to give it kind of a hazy kind of look. So nothing crazy. So we come back over, you just see it's centered up. Nothing happening there. So what we're gonna do now is, let me see here. What should we start on? So we probably need some to-dos. Probably be a good way to start. And so we're gonna create a constructor here. I'll pass in props, and since we're extending a component, we need to call super. Pass it to the parent that we're extending. And then we're going to say this dot state equals and we'll give it an object there. And so I'm going to copy and paste in what I have because this part's not super important, just so you can see it. So I have an object called chores, which is an array of these various chores. They all have an ID, so it's a unique number. So if you're calling like an API, they would typically have an ID, the name, the description of the to-do, and then is it completed. And so you can see we have one that is false. So do the dishes is not completed. Perfect. So we go ahead and save that. Now the next thing we probably want to do is come down here and see in our render component here, and we'll use a destructuring object here. So we'll say chores. We're going to fetch it out of this.state. Oops, equals this.state. And then here you should be able to say chores dot just JSON.stringify, just so you can see that it's there. Then we come back over and you see there's all our data printed out on the screen. Pretty cool, right? So we have that. I'm actually going to get rid of that. And here we'll come down and we'll say we'll return. We just put these single parentheses there. Braces, not braces. Yeah, parentheses. Basically to wrap our JSX. Because you have to wrap it. You could return differently, but it just makes it a little cleaner. So we're going to say we have a div, and here we had it was a class name of app that was there already. So now what we do, we'll put an h1 tag and we'll say chores. And from here we want an unordered list. And now this is the power of components right here. So we can have this unordered list and we can generate the list items. So before I put any list items, I'm just going to put test in there. You'll see just nothing really happening. So what we need to come over here, let me hide this from the sidebar, and we'll create a new file. And we'll call this new file, we'll call it listitem.jsx. While we're at it, I'm actually going to rename this. JSX isn't necessary, you can just call it JS. But let's see, we get an error. Just got to restart the server since we changed the file extension. But it just helps programs like Atom or editors, Atom, Sublime, Visual Studio Code recognize that it's JSX and give you the proper styling and validation. Great. So I have this list item JSX. And so for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import React, and we'll also grab pure component. This is one way you can create a component. And I'm going to give it some styling here. And so I'm not going to focus on this, but just want to show you. So here we can have basically write our styles in JavaScript instead of CSS. So you saw back here, we're writing just pure CSS, which gets imported into our main app JSX. But here we're going to actually just do them inline. It's going to be easy. And it just gives you some variety and shows you how different ways you can do it. And so you have styles, and we'll have li, which is a list item. And we also have this left wall, which is a function. So it's a little different, which we can pass a color to, and then it'll render the background color of whatever color we're passing to it. So awesome. So now if we come down here, we can say export default class list item extends pure component, which you could just extend component like we do in app JSX. But when you do that, it's because you're managing state and other things. When you have no state to manage and you're just a pure, I call them dumb components or presentational components, you're just rendering stuff to the screen. So you don't care that and checking your own state or whatever, you're just getting all your state from the properties being passed in. Awesome. So we're just going to say render, return, and here we'll say we have an li. I'm going to say style equals, we can pass it a variable name, which is our styles.li. And so that'll pass all these inline properties from right here into here. So that'll take care of our styling for us. Trying to think what to do next based on the order here. Just leave that there. And here we'll say div, and I'll say style equals styles.leftWall. So this will be that green border or red border on the side there. And I need to pass in the color. So we'll say this dot props dot completed. So if it is completed, yeah, I cannot type. Completed. Then we'll say green, else we'll say red. Looks pretty straightforward, right? And then here is where we want to put a list body item. So we need to create another component here to help us out. And we don't really need to do this. It's probably overkill, but I think it's good practice to show you guys how we create a even simpler component. So this is another presentational component. So from here, we'll just import React from React. So you notice we didn't import pure component or component directly. We're just React by itself. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab some styling that I already predefined. So we have like a little wrapper that'll wrap the name and description just to kind of box it in. And then the name, we just apply a font size, and then description, a font size. So nothing crazy. So now here's the cool part about React components. So we say const list body equals, and we can destructure here our name and description props. Otherwise, you could just write that it says props here, getting passed into a function. But instead of them passed in like that. And actually, instead of having to type out the word return, I can just do this. And now it treats it like it's an inline. And so this automatically returns. So you say div, I'm going to say style equals, say styles.wrapper. You see how that kind of makes this, your JSX down here, a lot cleaner when you put your styles kind of outside or in another CSS file. And we can say span, say style equals styles.name. I'm just going to copy this down below. And I'll type description there. Perfect. So now we have this component, which is, it's literally just a function. That's the cool part. And so we can come back over here now where we need to put in our list body function. And boop. So here we can type list body. Oops, actually I need to import it. There we go. So now that's imported into our project. And it's probably exploding and failing right now because we're in the middle of stuff. And we'll say name equals, we'll say this.props.name. So this is another thing to point out, is when you're extending a pure component or a component, you're going to say this.props.name because it's a class. And so you're referencing a class property. Whereas when you have these truly just components, presentational components that are just a function, you're literally, you pass the props in right here. And so you would say props.this, or if you destructure them, you can just reference them directly. So it's kind of a big change there. That's why some people kind of like it. It's less typing for them. And here we'll say description, which we could have called these props whatever we wanted to, but we'll just make them match so it's clear. And close our component out. So now we're using this component here, and you see we don't have a closing tag. Like we didn't go type list body. We could have, and I think that it's completely valid. But if you have no closing tag, it's a lot cleaner to write it like this, and you just self-close it. So make sure you self-close it, otherwise you will get an error. So we have that. That is looking pretty good. If I save that, I'm sure it's still exploding. Let me refresh actually here. All right, so it still says test because I don't think we're actually including this yet in our app.jsx. So if we go to app.jsx, scroll down, yep, so we're not including it yet. So the next thing, we now need to include that list item. But what we're going to do here, this is going to be pretty cool. So we're actually going to render our list of items. So for every chore in the array of chores, we will generate a list item component. So we don't have to basically paste this code over and over again. We basically have defined it in one place and we're going to render it into the page. So say chores.map and we'll say chore. Oops. So just like we've done before. There we go. And here, let's make sure we import our list item here. There we go. So now we come back down and we can type list item. And because this is being replicated a bunch of times, we want to type key. And we want to give it a unique key, which chore.id should be our unique key. And I'm going to pass the ID itself because I don't believe you can use the key to identify it as a prop. Even though we pass it in as a prop, I don't think you can actually access that one. I could be wrong. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And then name, chore.name, completed. Say chore.completed. So it'd probably be easier if we just passed down the whole chore itself. But instead we'll just do individual items. It's fine. Chore.description. And what I mean is we could say chore equals chore, and then down below destructured and grabbed everything out of it if we wanted to. Personal preference if you want to write it out or just pass the whole item. All depends. So we also want to pass this. We want to do a handle on click because if you remember from the original demo, you could actually click on each to-do item and then it would toggle the color back and forth as completed or incomplete. And so we're going to say this dot handle on click, which is a function we need to go to define. Since this is a class, this handle on click is a property of the class. So let's come up here just before render. Oops. And we'll say this dot, oops, nope. We'll say handle on click equals, we'll just say ID. We don't need parentheses there. We'll say const chores equal, we're gonna use a Lodash function here. So we need to import Lodash. That was the library we imported at the beginning there where we said yarn add Lodash. And we're going to use something called clone deep. So it's a function they have, which allows you to make a deep copy of your state here. Because you don't want to modify your state directly. You want to basically make a copy, make your changes, and then all at once update your state. Which I'll explain in another video. But that's a pretty important concept in React to maintain this one-way data flow. Because you don't want to modify this directly because then React may not know how to update the DOM. It won't know that you changed something because you got to use its API, which is this.setState, which will then make sure to trigger re-rendering the DOM in certain places. So from here, we'll say let chore of chores. So we'll iterate over our chores now that we have a copy of them. And we can say if the chore.id, oops, triple equals. I got some kind of weird characters here, special things, but trust me, it's just a 1, 2, 3, triple equals. And so if the chore ID matches, basically we're iterating over our list, trying to find the matching chore that we're toggling. And we'll say chore.completed equals not chore.completed. So basically we'll just toggle it. And we should be able to throw a break to break out of that for loop there. Then if we come down here, we can say this.setState. So this is the property I was telling you, or the function I was telling you about. I'm gonna say chores is equal to chores. Where if you're using the shorthand syntax, you can even go like this. And that should say chores. It's the same as saying chores. So that should work. So we basically are updating our state. So whichever one, we made a copy of this, and then we're going to say completed is not false, which will make that true, or not true, which will make it false. And then we'll basically we'll update the state by saying set state chores is equal to chores essentially. Perfect. So now that we have that, so now we have this that we pass down, this handle on click. If I save, come over here, list body does not contain a default export. Oop, I knew we missed something. So we have a const list body, need to export it. There we go. That looks a little ugly. Let's see, why does that look that way? Those look way too big. We'll figure it out in a sec. But, so we have this, styles, oh, handle on click, that's right. So where we left off was this handle on click, which is getting passed down a function that'll be passed to the list item. List item can toggle essentially by clicking, passing the ID up to here and passing it down. So let's go over to list item. And where do we want to put this? At the top level here, the actual list item itself. That way if you click on the whole thing, it'll take shape. And we'll say on click equals, and we're going to use JavaScript in here. And so it doesn't click on, you want to wrap it in a function like this. That way it doesn't automatically happen or click on page load. Let me say this.props handle on click props.id. So you see there, we're going to handle basically rendering or handle clicking the ID or passing the ID when we get clicked. So we save that. These are gigantic. They are working. I feel like I missed a flex property in here. Let me take a quick look. All right, so I found the issue. So here, basically wrap this in a div, which I did not want to do. It should be just a self-closing div right there. So we come back over, bam, now we're talking. Cool. Yeah, so all that happened was I was wrapping this div around this list body here. So we have that all fixed. We're good to go. Our clicking is now working. Everything's looking good. It's styled. And that's it. Perfect. So next time we'll probably get into some of the styling, how to pass props more efficiently, how to validate props that are coming in. But the big takeaway from this is pure components are a more performant way than rendering just a regular component, because React knows that you aren't going to be managing any state or anything like that. You're just a dumb component that's just going to take the props and render them to the page. Then supposedly, I don't think they've optimized for this just yet, but there's been talks about optimizing for this, where it's just a pure function, where it has inputs and an output. But this is a nice, easy way to write it if you just have simple components. A lot of people like to export these actually as named components. So they'll say export const list body, and then you'll actually import it by its name into your other file. But you can see how we basically created that component. We've rendered it here. It's kind of unnecessary, but good for learning purposes here. And then an app, basically, we iterate over our list of chores using .map, which basically returns a function. So it returns an array. So an array of these list items, which then get rendered onto the page. And then pass in all the properties for each chore in the chores array. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment below. I'm pretty active on here and answering questions. Also, if you appreciate the video and you liked it, enjoyed it, learned something, Please share, like, and subscribe. It helps others find the video that are interested in programming and learning to code. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned next week.